This is not a story pulled from the archives. This is not a mystery wrapped in decades of dust and faded photographs. This is happening right now. Two children were laughing in their backyard on the morning of May 2nd, 2025. 40 minutes later, the world they knew, the swings, the boots, the breakfast routine, had simply swallowed them whole. 6-year-old Lilly Sullivan, 4-year-old Jack Sullivan. No confirmed sightings. No arrests. No bodies. No clear answer for what unfolded in that razor-thin window between ordinary and gone. Tonight, we walk through every confirmed fact, every haunting detail, every thread that investigators have pulled, and every thread that has led nowhere. Because in a town of barely 100 people, surrounded by nothing but forest and silence, children do not vanish into thin air. Something happened, and someone knows what it is. Lansdowne Station, Pictou County, Nova Scotia. If you've never heard of it, that tells you everything. Population sparse. Roads long, unpaved, and isolated. Cell service unreliable. The land itself is unforgiving. Thick underbrush, marshlands, fallen timber, steep ravines, and the middle river cutting through it all like a dark vein. This is not a suburban neighborhood where someone might notice a strange car, a strange face, a strange moment. This is remote terrain, where distance swallows sound and the trees keep every secret. Lilly and Jack lived on 𝐸𝐿𝐼 Road, a house set back from the road, almost entirely enclosed by woods. Inside that home, their mother, Malaya Brooks Murray, 27, their stepfather, Daniel Martell, 34, their baby sister, Meadow, just 16 months old, and Daniel's mother, Janie Martell, living in a camper position just behind the main house. Lilly was the loud one, energetic, imaginative, the kind of child who narrated her own adventures at full volume. Jack was quieter, observant, serious, the kind of small boy who studied your face before he trusted you. They rode the bus together to Salt Springs Elementary, a school of roughly 80 students. Small enough that everybody knew everybody. Small enough that two missing children should have shaken the whole community to its core. And it did. But first, what we know happened that Friday morning. Malaya's alarm went off at 6 a.m. She marked both children absent from school around 6:15, then went back to sleep. By 8 a.m., both parents could hear Lilly and Jack awake and moving through the house. Lilly reportedly drifted in and out of the bedroom. The baby woke up. Daniel turned on a show. The adults dozed in and out of consciousness. Morning routines, the kind nobody thinks twice about. Then, at approximately 9:40 a.m., Malaya felt it before she could name it. The silence. The particular, wrong kind of quiet that every parent recognizes instantly. She asked Daniel if he could hear the kids. He couldn't. They got up. The house was empty. The front door still had a wrench wedged against it, a makeshift noise alarm, and it hadn't moved. The likely exit was a back sliding glass door. Outside, 2 pairs of rubber boots were gone. Lily's pink boots with the rainbow print, Jack's blue dinosaur boots, and Lily's strawberry backpack, missing too. At 9:40 a.m., Malaya dialed 911. Meanwhile, just meters away, Janie Martell had been outside earlier that morning. She had heard them. At approximately 8:59 a.m., she could hear Lilly and Jack giggling on the swings behind the house. Clear as anything. That sound, 2 children laughing on a Friday morning, is the last confirmed proof that Lilly and Jack Sullivan were alive and well. 40 minutes. That is the entire window. Less than 1 hour between laughter and silence. Between present and gone. Something happened on 𝐸𝐿𝐼 Road between 8:59 and 9:40 a.m. on May 2nd, 2025. And nearly a year later, nobody, not the RCMP, not the search teams, not the hundreds of volunteers who combed through kilometers of brutal terrain, has been able to say with certainty what that something was. The moment Malaya Brooks Murray made that 911 call, everything accelerated. RCMP responded within minutes. Officers were on the ground, canvassing the property within hours. The early working theory was the one that anyone in a wooded, rural community might instinctively reach for. The children wandered. Kids do that. Kids, especially curious ones like Lilly and Jack. Push through gaps in fences. Follow paths into tree lines. Chase sounds deeper than they intended to go. But what the search teams found, or more precisely, what they didn't find, began to quietly dismantle that theory with every passing hour. Drones launched. Helicopters swept the canopy. Search dogs were deployed across the terrain. ATVs pushed into trails too narrow for standard vehicles. Over 100 searchers fanned out across approximately 4 kilometers on that very first day alone, in weather hovering around 40 degrees. Wet and bitter cold from snowmelt, the ground soft and treacherous with mud. By that afternoon, a vulnerable missing persons alert was issued. An Amber Alert was not activated. The criteria, specifically the requirement of confirmed abduction evidence, had not been met. That decision would become one of the case's most debated points. Nothing was found. Then, a fragment of hope and a new set of questions. A piece of pink blanket was located along a pipeline trail roughly 1 kilometer from a house. Uncertain at first, it was later confirmed to belong to Lilly. Boot prints were also identified along the same trail. 2 sets child-size, distinct from one another. One bore the marking 29, embedded in the sole, consistent with Lilly's UK size 29 boot, equivalent to a Canadian size 11. Police never publicly confirmed a definitive match. The rest of the blanket turned up near the end of the driveway. Rain had complicated everything. Scent trails, already fragile, were washed in. Despite extraordinary canine effort, no trail extended meaningfully beyond that initial discovery point. And that was it. That was all the terrain gave back. Janie Martell, Daniel's mother, walked investigators through the property. She had been outside that morning. She had heard the children. She described exactly what she would have expected to hear if they had pushed beyond the fence line into the woods. Lily's voice, loud and insistent, calling Jack forward. "Come on, Jackie. Let's go, Jackie." That's what Lily always did. That's what the woods would have echoed with, had the children gone that way. Janie heard none of it. She heard the swings. Then she heard silence. Then, sometime later, she heard Daniel calling their names, and assumed reasonably that he was calling them inside. It wasn't until she stepped out her camper and found Malaya standing there, baby on her hip, face flat with shock, that she understood. Jack and Lily are missing. Janie ran, straight into the woods, toward the little fort the children had built from branches and fir boughs, the spot they always played. She searched. Daniel searched. Neither found a single trace. Within days, the operation escalated beyond anything Lansdowne Station had ever seen. Waterways were checked. Abandoned mine shafts were assessed. Neighboring properties were searched. A drone sweeping the area late on May 2nd, just before midnight, detected 2 heat signatures near the water. Small, close together, motionless. An officer followed up and determined it was likely wildlife. A bear, most probably. But that image, 2 small heat sources, side by side in the dark, near the river's edge, lodged itself into the minds of everyone who heard it, and it has never fully let go. By late summer, the numbers were staggering. Over 12,000 hours of combined search time, more than 5,000 video files reviewed, nearly 600 tips assessed, 60-plus interviews conducted, 11 investigative units engaged, a $150,000 provincial reward offered, cadaver dogs deployed across a 40-kilometer sweep of the highest probability areas in September 2025. No human remains detected. The RCMP were careful with their language. Absence of detection does not conclusively rule anything out. And then there was what the search coordinator from the Ontario-based group, "Please Bring Me Home," said after personally walking the terrain for the first time. She had come expecting to find gaps in the search. Overlooked corridors, unmapped paths, places the initial teams might have missed. Instead, what she found shook her own assumptions. "I'm having a really hard time fathoming that probability now that I've seen it for myself." The woods had been covered, extensively, with precision and technology and sheer human determination, and still nothing, which left everyone standing at the same impossible question. If they aren't in the woods, where are they? When children disappear, investigators don't just search the terrain. They search the people. Every relationship, every routine, Every crack in the foundation of daily life becomes a potential lead. And in the case of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, the people closest to them, the ones sleeping under the same roof on the morning of May 2nd, became the subject of intense public scrutiny almost immediately. Daniel Martel, the children's stepfather, became the most visible face of the family after the disappearance. He gave interviews. He walked reporters through the property. He answered questions that most people in his position might have deflected entirely. He pointed to the patio door the children would have exited through. He showed where Janie had been raking the evening before, the exact spot where investigators found the only boot print they could definitively link to Lilly and Jack, pressed into the soft mud where the ground had been freshly worked. He was cooperative, visibly so, almost deliberately so. Daniel volunteered his DNA. He invited additional searches of the property. He offered his phone repeatedly. He asked about doing more polygraph examinations. Each time, according to Daniel, our CMP told him it wasn't necessary. He submitted to multiple formal recorded interviews, the first lasting approximately 4 hours. He described sitting across from investigators while they filled out the DNA consent paperwork and watching them check the box marked "No criminal involvement." "Very happy," he said when asked how that felt. "But I've known since the start that I'm 100% innocent." He noted something else about his polygraph examination, something that raised eyebrows among those following the case closely. The questions, he said, were focused specifically on death, not on the disappearance, not on abduction, not on whether he had any knowledge of what happened that morning. The conclusion drawn was that he had told the truth when asked about the death of Lilly and Jack. But the question of what happened to them, of where they went, of who might have taken them, was, by his own account, never directly posed. He was asked plainly on camera, "Did you have anything to do with the disappearance of Jack and Lilly?" "No." "Did you kill them?" "No." Then there were the allegations that arrived alongside the scrutiny. Accusations from within Malea's social circle that painted a different picture of the household. Friends claimed that after Malea moved in with Daniel, she became isolated. Contact with her network cut off. Phones monitored on both sides, Daniel countered. Same passwords, mutual access, mutual choices. He deflected questions about the nature of their relationship directly, stating only that he preferred not to discuss Malea. That boundary, reasonable or not, became another point of speculation in online communities that already rendered their verdicts long before any evidence was made public. Malea herself withdrew. After an early confrontation to command post, she stepped back from the public search effort almost entirely. Friends described her in the immediate aftermath as flat, monotone, non-reactive in ways that unsettled people who loved her, though those same friends were quick to add that Malea had always been soft-spoken, measured, slow to show emotion in public. She had been, by every account from people who knew her before Daniel, an exceptional mother, attentive, clean, consistent, devoted to her children in ways that were quiet but unmistakable. Then came the financial picture, excavated through court documents. The family had been losing approximately $1,900 per month in child benefit payments. Child support from the children's biological father had stopped months earlier. Daniel's work hours had been reduced. His father was reportedly helping with groceries and fuel. The vehicle was out of service. These are not details that point directly to anything. Financial stress is not evidence of harm, but they form a backdrop that investigators and the public alike were unwilling to ignore. 12 search warrants were executed in total. Phones seized and forensically examined. GPS data reviewed. Bank records analyzed. Text applications recovered. Vehicles subjected to full forensic examination. And according to everything publicly released, no digital inconsistencies were found. No location data that contradicted the accounts given. No communication trails pointing toward premeditation or concealment. 7 people submitted to polygraph examinations. No deception was indicated across any of them. RCMP has never named Malea Brooks Murray or Daniel Martel as suspects. They have also never publicly cleared either of them. That silence, deliberate, procedurally necessary, and absolutely maddening to everyone watching from the outside, is where the case continues to live. One prior detail had also emerged from the children's school. Staff at Salt Springs Elementary had previously reported concerns to Child Protective Services. Frequent lateness, clothing inappropriate for the weather, hygiene issues that stood out enough to flag. An autism evaluation appointment had reportedly been scheduled for one of the children before the disappearance. No findings of abuse were ever released publicly, but the reports existed. They had been made, and in the context of two missing children and an active investigation, they were impossible to set aside. Janie Martell sat in front of the camera and said what a mother says. She does not believe her son had anything to do with this. Her heart, she said, tells her so, but hearts and investigations rarely speak the same language. Every missing persons case has a detail that refuses to settle, a fact that sits at the edge of the known timeline and pulls at everything around it like a loose thread on a sweater. In the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, that detail is a woman standing beside a car on Gerlach Road, and it may be the most important thing anyone has reported since the morning of May 2nd, 2025. Here is what the court documents reveal. Between 9:30 and 10 a.m., squarely inside the confirmed disappearance window, a woman driving along Gerlach Road made a 911 call. She was not calling about the Sullivan children. She did not yet know the Sullivan children were missing. What she reported was this. She saw a young girl with brown hair pulled into pigtails and a younger boy with dirty blonde hair walking near the train tracks. Ahead of them, standing beside an older tan or gold sedan with the rear passenger door open, was a woman, approximately 50 to 60 years old. This report was made before Lilly and Jack were publicly known to be missing. Read that again. Before anyone outside that property knew two children had vanished from Gerlach Road, someone driving past had already seen what appeared to be two small children walking in that direction, and an older woman beside a car with the door open. Police have not confirmed whether the sighting is definitively linked to Lilly and Jack Sullivan. They have also not dismissed it. That is the official position, neither confirmed nor denied, and it is a kind of careful non-statement that investigators issue when something is too significant to discard but too unverified to elevate publicly without risking the integrity of the case. The biological father side of the family carried their own grief into this investigation and their own suspicion. Cody Sullivan had not seen his children in approximately 3 years. His mother, Belinda, had last held Lilly and Jack roughly a year and 9 months before they disappeared. She showed up the very next morning to help search, combing through the woods beside the house alongside her daughter, calling out names, trying to make sense of terrain that seemed to actively resist the idea that two small children could have moved through it voluntarily. Belinda described what she found when she went inside to see Malaya. The woman she remembered, clean, composed, meticulous, did not match the home she walked into. She was careful with her words. She understood that circumstances change things, but the contrast disturbed her in ways she couldn't fully explain away. At 12:45 a.m. on May 3rd, just hours after the initial 911 call, Malaya made a second call to police, raising concern about Cody. The suggestion appeared to be that perhaps the biological father had taken the children. Police responded quickly. Cody and Belinda were woken in the early hours by patrol cars pulling into their driveway. Their home was searched. Their vehicles were examined. Highway toll cameras were reviewed for any trace of Cody's presence near Gerlach Road that morning. He was not there. Toll cameras confirmed it. He passed polygraph examinations. RCMP later made contact with him and communicated clearly they were no longer looking in his direction. But what that second 911 call revealed, perhaps unintentionally, was the way suspicion was moving in multiple directions simultaneously. The family unit on Gerlach Road pointing outward, the biological family pointing inward, investigators standing at the center of it all, publicly saying as little as possible while privately reviewing thousands of hours of footage, hundreds of tips, forensic samples, and digital data that the public will likely never see in full. Meanwhile, the volunteer searchers kept coming. The nonprofit group, Please Bring Me Home, made the journey from Ontario. 30, 40 people at a time, splitting into teams, walking the pipeline trails, following the riverbank, searching areas that had already been searched, because sometimes the second set of eyes finds what the first missed, and sometimes the only thing left to offer grieving people is the act of looking. One of those searches turned up items that briefly accelerated the community's pulse. A boy's t-shirt with what appeared to be burn damage, a child's bicycle, a blue blanket, A 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿 box with what appeared to be a familiar name inside, significant enough that searchers handed it directly to 𝐟CMP officers who were present on the day. Police assessed every item. None were publicly confirmed as relevant to the investigation. The river remained the deepest concern. Middle River moves fast. It connects to larger waterways, which connect eventually to the ocean. An underwater recovery team had searched in early May. Nothing was found, but water searches are notoriously and devastatingly incomplete. Water levels shift. Currents carry things. What was submerged in May might surface in October. What was missed along one bank might appear, weeks later, a kilometer downstream. That's why searchers came back. That's why they kept measuring the riverbank against a memory of where the water line had been. That's why, even after cadaver dogs swept 40 kilometers of the highest probability zones and detected nothing, nobody was prepared to say the water had given up all of its answers. Because rivers don't make promises. And 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐞 Road, on the morning of May 2nd, 2025, was a road where a woman stood beside an open car door, and two children may have been walking directly toward her. There's a version of this case that the public can see. Tips called in, searches conducted, interviews given on camera, press conferences where carefully chosen words reveal almost nothing while appearing to say everything. And then there's the version happening behind closed doors. The one bill from 8,000 reviewed video files, 12 executed search warrants, forensic laboratories processing samples in silence, and investigators who have heard things from witnesses that will never make it onto a public tip line. That version is the one that matters most, and it is the one we know the least about. What we do know is this. 𝐟CMP moved with unusual breadth on this case from the very beginning. 12 search warrants is not a routine number for a missing persons file. Phones were seized, not just examined, seized. GPS location data was pulled and cross-referenced. Bank accounts were opened and analyzed. Recovered text applications were reconstructed. Vehicles were subjected to full forensic processing, the kind that looks for things invisible to human eye. Trace evidence, biological material, fibers, residue. Everything publicly released indicates no digital inconsistencies were uncovered. No location data contradicted any account given by anyone connected to the family. But absence of contradiction is not the same as confirmation of innocence. And investigators know that better than anyone. 7 individuals submitted to polygraph examinations across the course of the investigation. No deception was indicated in any of them. Again, that is a data point, not a conclusion. Polygraphs are investigative tools, not courtroom verdicts. They measure physiological stress responses, not truth itself. Experienced investigators use them as one instrument in an orchestra, not as the entire performance. Staff Sergeant 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐿, the 𝐟CMP spokesperson who has faced the cameras and the questions throughout this case, has been a study in deliberate restraint. Every answer calibrated. Every word chosen with the precision of someone who understands that a single sentence said carelessly can derail months of careful work. Are any family members considered suspects? I wouldn't say anybody's a suspect. Is this being treated as a criminal case? We gather all of our information to a judicial standard in case there is criminality. Do you think the children are still in the woods? The chances are low. What he would not say is equally significant. He would not confirm abduction. He would not deny it either. He acknowledged that 2 witnesses reported hearing a vehicle in the area during the early hours of May 2nd, coming and going, and described it as something that followed up on and considered relevant enough to investigate without being prepared to attach any criminal significance to it publicly. That vehicle, those sounds in the dark, combined with a woman standing beside an open car door on 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐞 Road during the disappearance window, and you begin to understand why investigators have not closed any door in this case. Because doors that appear closed sometimes turn out to be the most important ones. Daniel Martel continued to speak. He described the investigation moving forward. DNA results being processed, forensic work progressing, the sheer weight of information that had to be methodically reviewed before conclusions could be drawn. He framed himself as a man waiting for answers alongside everyone else. He said he believed the case was criminal. He said he hoped Lilly and Jack would be found alive. He said he held that hope every single day. He also said something that lingered. When asked what he thought had happened to the children, he paused. He had theories, he said. Theories that shifted, evolved, reconfigured themselves as he lay awake at night and ran the timeline backward and forward in his mind. But he always came back to the same place. He deferred, ultimately, to the RCMP because they had the most information, because they had professional training, because they were the ones invested in delivering justice for Lilly and Jack. It was a reasonable answer. It was also an answer that told us very little. Meanwhile, Malea's friends, the women who had known her before Gerlach Road, before Daniel, before any of this, continued to carry the weight of her absence from the public narrative. They remembered who she had been. They described a mother who never raised her voice at her children, who always said, "Now, Lily, what did Mommy say?" in a tone that was soft and patient and consistent. They wrestled publicly with the gap between the woman they had known and the circumstances they were now living inside. One of them said something that cut through every layer of speculation and theory and digital forensics and police procedure and landed somewhere raw and human. Until you're in that situation, you really don't know how you would act. She was defending Malea's withdrawal from the public search, but the words carry further than she perhaps intended. Because nobody in this story, not the investigators, not the family, not the volunteers, not the online communities that have appointed themselves as judges, truly knows what happened inside that house on that road in that 40-minute window that changed everything. What the financial records revealed added another layer to an already complicated picture. The family was losing approximately $1,900 per month in child benefit payments that had been tied to Lily and Jack. Child support from Cody Sullivan had stopped months before the disappearance. Daniel's working hours had been reduced. His father was reportedly covering groceries and fuel. The household was under sustained, grinding financial pressure, the kind that doesn't announce itself dramatically. It just accumulates quietly until something breaks. None of that is evidence of crime. Financial hardship is a circumstance shared by millions of families who would never harm their children, but it is context. And in a case where context is almost everything investigators have to work with publicly, it matters. The school had flagged concerns. Child Protective Services had been contacted before May 2nd. Frequent lateness. Weather inappropriate clothing. Hygiene. An evaluation appointment scheduled for one of the children that was never kept. Because by the time it would have happened, Lily and Jack were already gone. The investigation remains open. Ferociously, deliberately, expensively open. Over 12,000 hours of combined search effort. A $150,000 provincial reward that has produced no confirmed breakthrough. Thousands of tips still being processed. Forensic results still pending. And somewhere in Nova Scotia, in a laboratory or a filing system or a digital archive that the public will never have access to, there's information that the RCMP has gathered and not yet acted on publicly, or has acted on in ways we cannot see, that is either reassuring or terrifying, depending on what you believe happened on Gerlach Road. 2 children were alive at 8:59 a.m. on May 2nd, 2025. We know this because someone heard them laughing. By 9:40 a.m., they were gone. We know this because their mother walked through an empty house and made a phone call that has since become the fixed point around which an entire investigation orbits. 41 minutes. That is the width of the window. 41 minutes in a rural Nova Scotia community, on a dirt road that almost nobody drives, surrounded by woods that have been searched with every tool available to modern law enforcement. And still, Lily Sullivan and Jack Sullivan have not been found. Not a trace of them beyond a piece of pink blanket. 2 sets of boot prints pressed into soft mud, and the fading echo of children giggling on a swing set on a cold May morning. Let's sit with the possibilities. Not theories. Not accusations. The actual possibilities that investigators themselves have refused to eliminate. The first, they wandered. 2 children in rubber boots and a backpack. Curious and unsupervised on a Friday morning, they were supposed to spend sick at home, pushed into the tree line, and kept going. The terrain defeated them. They fell somewhere that searchers have not yet reached, into a ravine or a waterway or a depression in the earth that swallowed them so completely that 12,000 hours of search effort and cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar returned nothing. The search coordinator who walked that terrain herself said she struggled to accept this explanation after seeing it firsthand. The density of the brush, the fallen timber, the physical demand of moving through it at adult height, let alone at the height of a 4- and 6-year-old. Janie Martell said she had practically carried Jack through those woods on family walks. The idea that he navigated them alone, in the cold, without calling out, without being heard, it strains credibility with every hour that passes without a discovery. The second possibility, the water took them. Middle River runs fast. Its banks are soft and unpredictable, especially in early May when snowmelt pushes water levels higher than usual. 2 small children in rubber boots at the river's edge would have no defense against a current that moves with indifferent force. Underwater recovery teams searched in May and found nothing. But water searches are incomplete by their nature. Currents carry. Levels drop and reveal. Seasons turn and change what was hidden and what is exposed. Authorities have repeatedly, deliberately, and specifically flagged water as a significant concern in this case. That is not an accident. That is investigators communicating something to the public without quite saying it. The third possibility is the one nobody wants to say plainly, but that the evidence quietly and persistently suggests. Someone was on Gerlach Road that morning. A vehicle was heard in the early hours, coming and going. A woman was seen standing beside an open car door during the exact disappearance window, with 2 children matching Lilly and Jack's descriptions walking toward her. That report was made before the children were publicly known to be missing. That detail alone is the kind of thing that makes investigators sit very still in very quiet rooms. If someone took Lilly and Jack Sullivan, whether a stranger, whether someone known to the family, whether someone operating with knowledge of the household's routines, then everything changes. The absence of physical evidence in the woods becomes an explanation rather than a mystery. The rain-washed scent trails become deliberate concealment rather than bad luck. The boot prints that stopped at the pipeline trail become a point of transfer, not a dead end. And then there is the fourth possibility, the one closest to home, the one that the online communities have pursued with a ferocity that crossed long ago from concern into something uglier, but that investigators themselves have never publicly dismissed, even as they declined to name anyone. The household was financially strained. The relationship between Malaya and Daniel carried allegations that have never been confirmed or conclusively refuted. The children's school had raised concerns. The house had been described as drastically different from what people who loved Malaya expected to find. 7 polygraphs produced no deception, but polygraphs are not infallible. 12 warrants were executed not because investigators were satisfied, but because they were still looking for something they hadn't yet found. RCMP has never named a suspect. They have never publicly cleared anyone either. That silence is not neutral. That silence is investigative strategy. That silence means a file is open. The forensic results are still being processed, and someone somewhere in a laboratory, in a witness statement, in a digital record that has not yet been fully analyzed, may hold the piece that breaks this case open. Lilly Sullivan was 6 years old. She loved pink blankets and strawberry backpacks, and calling her little brother forward into adventure. Jack Sullivan was 4 years old. He was serious and quiet and studied the world with eyes that took everything in. They went out to play on a Friday morning, and they did not come back. Nearly a year later, the RCMP says the case is very active. The reward remains unclaimed. The tips continue to come in. The forensic work continues. And somewhere, in the woods, in the water, in someone's memory, or in someone's conscience, the answer to what happened on Gerlach Road is waiting to be found. It will be found. It has to be, because children do not disappear without leaving something behind. And eventually, no matter how long it takes, silence breaks. If you have any information, any detail at all, no matter how small or insignificant it seems, about the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, contact the RCMP Major Crime Unit directly or submit a tip through Nova Scotia Crime Stoppers. The $150,000 provincial reward remains active. Someone out there knows something. That someone might be watching this video right now. Share this video. Every share is another set of eyes. Every set of eyes is another chance that the right person sees it, remembers something, and makes the call that brings Lilly and Jack home. Subscribe if you want to follow this case as it develops, because this story is not over. Not until those children are found. For Lily, for Jack, keep sharing.